Hey everyone, welcome to session 186 of the Behavioral Observations podcast. I'm joined today by Chrissy Barosky, Clinical Director of Bierman Autism Centers. In this episode, we discuss how their organization adopted a precision teaching approach for their learners. You heard that correctly. A large multi-state organization transitioned all their data collection practices to the chart. So in this show, we dive into how Chrissy and her colleagues managed to pull this off, what they learned during the process, and the benefits they've seen from taking on such a large endeavor. We also went into depth about a paper that Chrissy and her colleagues published in Behavior Analysis and Practice titled Increasing Trials Presented to Children with Autism Using Frequency Building with Modeling and Feedback. It's essentially a case study of how the authors taught behavioral technicians to improve the efficiency of their teaching using a frequency building approach. And whether or not you care about the chart, I think this is a really interesting episode because it speaks to a larger issue of organizational change. Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you're not using the chart, let's be honest. So imagine for a moment that your agency decided to adopt it. So in many respects, this episode represents kind of an opportunity for a fun thought experiment about changing clinical practices more generally. So I hope you find this exercise interesting or helpful to think about. This session of the Behavioral Observations podcast is brought to you by HRIC Recruiting. So if you're looking for a job, you're about to graduate, you're contemplating a move, or if you just want to know if the grass is greener on the other side, go to hricolorado.com. We're also brought to you by Behavior University. Their mission is to provide university-quality professional development for the busy behavior analyst. Learn more about their CEU offerings and their RBT courses over at behavioruniversity.com/observations. Finally, we're brought to you by the University of Cincinnati Online. UC Online designed a Master's of Education in Behavior Analysis program that's 100% online and asynchronous, meaning you log on when it works for you. If you want to learn more, go to online.uc.edu and click the Request Info button. Okay, that's it for opening remarks. So without any further delay, let's get to this fun conversation with Chrissy Barosky.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
Chrissy Barosky, thanks for joining me on the Behavioral Observations Podcast. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be here and chat about precision teaching.
Well, that makes two of us. So you guys were kind enough to reach out and suggest this topic for discussion, and it's certainly something we've touched on many times on the show, but not recently. So I think it's about time to remind people about the all the fun things that come along with precision teaching and what can be done with it. So, and I think as we were just alluding to before we hit the record button, you have a unique perspective on that. That we'll get into momentarily. So, really excited to dig into this topic in more detail with you. Before we start with that, however, I'd like to know how you discovered applied behavior analysis or behavior analysis more generally. What was your first encounter with it? What made you kind of want to pursue it as a career?
It was definitely by chance. I did my undergrad at Northeastern University in Boston.
Go Huskies.
And I had, yes, go Huskies. And I was thinking that I wanted to get into some type of field of helping, like a helping profession. I didn't know if it was teaching, or I guess like many people going into your undergrad, you kind of have an idea, but maybe you're a little lost at what you're doing. And Northeastern had a co-op program. So I got some exposure into different aspects of different helping professions. I ended up working by chance with adults with developmental disabilities, doing some job coaching. And I was working with, one adult in particular who had an autism diagnosis, and we were doing job coaching, and we were cleaning an office or putting files away in an office that was working with children with autism. I had no idea what it was, and it seemed really interesting to me. And at that time, I was still thinking about going to get my master's, and was I going to do special ed or something along those lines. And I was in a class where my partner in my class my senior year said, I want to do this project on ABA versus other interventions for kids with autism. And I had no idea what ABA was. And we did it and it just clicked for me. I was like, well, this is a no-brainer. Why would I not want to do that? And so I found a master's program that was both special ed and ABA. So I went to get my master's at Columbia, and just for me, it seemed like it was just, how did I not know this that existed before now? And my previous work with adults and undergrad had made me realize there was such a big need for, if those adults had services earlier on in their life, would they have needed me at that point to, be bringing them to their jobs every day? Would it be different? Would it look different? And kind of fell in love with it from there. So I had done my master's like I said, at Columbia, got a lot of exposure to verbal behavior, working in the school systems. At that time, I still thought maybe I wanted to be a behavior analyst who worked in schools. And I graduated and I moved and got a taste for what the school systems were like outside of the nice, perfect setting I had it in for my master's program, and realized I don't know if I really want to be in schools. And so I found some way to get into the ABA world in home-based services and center-based services and consulting, and then eventually found my way to where I am now at Bierman, where I'm our chief clinical officer. I oversee all of our clinical operations. And then I also teach at Simmons University, which I think I needed to keep my hand in teaching some way. So now it's at the master's level. But the exciting thing at Simmons is that I get to teach a class that involves teaching the master's students about precision teaching, which I also never really thought that's where I would be, and to be someone who introduces them to the chart and hopes that they use it later on. And then just looking at ways now, I think in my career so many years later, of how we can introduce more people to just the field of ABA. Like I said, I happened to get into it by chance, and someone introduced it to me in a class, and otherwise I don't think I would have gone down this path or even knew what it was back then. And so that's something that's pretty important to me at this point in my career. And even now at Bierman, we just are implementing a partner program with Salem University to do some RBT coursework, because trying to do that same thing. Can we introduce people at the bachelor's level to the field of behavior analysis and try to broaden our scope of where people are accessing or coming in contact with it to start a career.
Very cool. So before we get any further, for those who aren't familiar with Bierman, do you just want to take a minute to describe the services and like where you guys operate and things along those lines?
Yeah, so Bierman Autism Centers is our full name. We are in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, opening in North Carolina, Arizona, Indiana is where we started. So we provide early intensive intervention for kids. I'd say our predominant age range is like 2 to 7, 9-year-old range. But we really focus heavily on skill acquisition, using precision teaching, and working with newly diagnosed children on the autism spectrum. And then we also provide a collaborative service. So we provide speech, OT, try to take a whole family-centered approach to services.
Great. And I assume, like many others, so I guess no, I'll stop saying assume. I'll just ask the question directly, I suppose. So has the company, can you talk about perhaps the growth of the organization? It sounds like you're in quite a number of states. Has that growth been recent, or is this something that that's been happening kind of gradually? Is it a little bit of both? I'm just curious, when I ever hear about an organization, especially with multiple locations and especially in multiple states, I'm just curious about the, how that develops. And it seems just like a mind-boggling enterprise from my little, provincial perspective. And so I'm just curious about the story of how you go from point A to point B.
Yeah, it's been a process over many of years. I've been with a company for going on 9 years this May. And when I started with Bierman, we were just in Indiana. The company had grown in Indiana, and I was moving to Massachusetts to start a PhD program. And they decided to open up in Massachusetts, and I was their first employee there, and I got to see growth firsthand. So we had grown in Massachusetts first, and then expanded, a few years later after that into Rhode Island, and then you go a few more years later, we go into New Jersey, and it's usually we're trying to expand very thoughtfully, but I know we know the need out there for services, and it's a little selfish, I guess, on my part too, like wanting to grow and spread the use of precision teaching, and just another way of looking at, I think, ABA services in that EIBI age range, and expand at a very thoughtful pace, not too fast, not too slow, to be able to reach a broader audience, I guess, because that, as anyone knows who's working in this field, there's not enough services to go around. And so we've had a not too fast, not too slow growth, I'd say. I'm sure that the pandemic maybe exploded down just a little bit, a little slower than we would have liked to, but we're just continuing to expand, go into new areas, give our team members an opportunity to grow within the company too, and move to another location, experience something a little different. I think that's something that I did during my career, and it was kind of great to practice in a few different states and get to know different people and access, I think, different clientele too.
Hey everyone, we're going to take a real quick break here and let you know that this segment of the podcast is brought to you by the University of Cincinnati Online. They've designed a master's in education and behavior analysis program that's 100% online and asynchronous, meaning you log on when it works for you. Their student success coordinators will work with you from start all the way until graduation to ensure you are receiving the support you need. Graduate in as few as 5 semesters from a top 10 program in total number of graduates and prepare for the BCBA exam. The program is FAFSA eligible, and UC also offers a business partnership program to offer tuition discounts to eligible employees. If you want to learn more, go to online.uc.edu and click the Request Info button. Okay, let's get back to the interview. I know we could probably spend a lot of time just talking about growth. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the precision teaching aspect. So you had noted that you are a PT newbie, or you were, excuse me, and now you're teaching it. Now you're implementing it in programs and things like that. So when in your career arc did you kind of encounter the chart, and what made it engaging in that process, reinforcing for you?
Yeah, I was, when I took the exam so many years ago, the chart was still on the task list at that point. So I was one of those people that had to figure out, like, what do they mean by this? And I accessed it briefly in grad school, but I would say like real briefly when talking about learning about direct instruction and charting data. But I hadn't really used it a ton. I remember watching, I don't know if you've ever seen the charting with Stephanie Bates video. It's a 6 or 7 year old girl who's like, you can learn the chart and anyone can learn it. And it's a pretty great video to watch to introduce yourself and not be that scared of it.
I've heard of that. I have friends who've referenced that. I've actually never seen the video itself, but I should probably take the time to find it for sure.
Yeah, it's a great short video that makes you realize you really shouldn't be afraid of the chart when this small child is schooling you and how to use it. That was actually, I remember watching it with one of my supervisees as we were talking about potentially introducing the chart and precision teaching within Bierman. We actually had a BCBA who worked with us who was very, very knowledgeable, had a ton of experience, and gave the idea, her name's Laura Grant, gave the idea of like, hey, we should change over all of our practices and use the chart. But prior to that, we were using, very verbal behavior approach, some trial by trial data, some, cold probe data. So thinking about moving to using the Standard Celeration Chart and learning about precision teaching, it was a little scary at first. And then you start to get exposed to it. And we had, brought in a couple of people who were very, very good charters and very good precision teachers.
I was just going to ask you about that. Like, how did you, what was the, your education, whether informally or formally, as it relates to that? And especially, I have to imagine your skill level has to be at a certain, level of expertise if you're going to roll this out, if you're at least contemplating rolling it out company-wide.
Yeah, we, so like I said, we had Laura Grant, and then she helped us bring in another BCBA who's a precision teacher, Liz, and I always get her last name, Liz Lefebvre, and the two of them came in and they helped us teach everyone very slowly. Talk about like shaping behavior, because you're changing the way that you do everything. And we were a smaller organization at the time, but still across a couple of states, and had multiple centers, and we had to shift the way everyone programmed a little bit, how they decided to measure and analyze their data. It was a whole shift in how we approached our practice, our clinical practice. And it took us a couple of years to really slowly change everyone's behavior over and start to, you first learn about what is a little bit out of what is precision teaching, but then really introducing everyone to the chart, learning how to chart data, learning how your programming can get onto the chart. And we make the joke that like once you kind of get in and start using it, you can't go back. Like you're either in and you're a believer, you heart the chart, and then you just can't go back. And so over time, I think we've become more and more, I'd say, fluent ourselves in using it. And now, I have people who have been here since we rolled it out, and are like, I could never change. This is my way of doing things now, and I couldn't imagine doing something else. But it was a couple of year process to convert over to be precision teachers from kind of what we were used to.
So if I could maybe bring you back to an earlier point on your learning curve with that, were there apprehensions, or did you have preconceived notions about the chart that you had to get over? And if so, can you kind of share what some of those might be?
Yeah, we definitely did. I think one of the things was that you would hear BCBA say, well, it's not on the task list anymore. Why we use this? Or this is an old, antiquated way of measuring behavior. I think we got some pushback, and even myself thinking like, is this something that's widely used, or are we just moving to use this method that maybe isn't as widely adopted in the field? So I think that was the majority of people's feelings surrounding, is this something that is a widely known practice, or since it was removed from the task list, is this something that we should still be learning? That was definitely, I feel like, one of the larger barriers. And then you're looking at your data, much more, I would say now, much more efficient practice. You can't hide behind the data. So it's just a different way of, learning how to do your job. I would say we had some turnover at that point. Like if you didn't heart the chart, you weren't staying during that time period.
I was just going to ask about, kind of employee, adoption, if you will. So I can understand perhaps people parting ways if they had a philosophical, disagreement in terms of existing employees. But talk to me a little bit about how that works with people you're interviewing right now. So if you're out there, I assume like any other ABA company, you're out there looking for staff. I don't think any ABA company out there is like, nope, we're good. So how do you broach that? How do you talk about it? And are there common fears or misunderstandings, et cetera, that you're encountering when you're talking with prospective either BCBAs or RBTs, or even talking with I guess the family and stakeholders stuff we can get into it perhaps separately, but I'm just curious about how you're how you're talking about these practices with people who don't have the history that you have right now with as it relates to the this area of practice.
It's we've had I would say a pretty good reaction from people. Every once in a while we might be talking to someone's like, "Oh, you use the chart? I would never do that. Like, I'm never putting my data or even trying to use it." And we're like, "Well, this probably isn't a good fit for you," and then end the interview there. But otherwise, people are usually pretty excited to learn and grow and try something new. We definitely approach it as like, I don't expect anyone to be an expert at this or have even used the chart outside of what people typically tell me, like, "Oh, I did some staff meds in grad school and I've seen it once or twice, but I'm not by any means proficient," and we don't expect anyone to. I think that's one thing that's really exciting maybe that we get to offer people, is you get to come in and learn something new that I really think enhances your practice and makes you a better behavior analyst, a better clinician, but we don't expect you to know it. So we promise that you can come in and we will teach it to you. We will make you the expert. We'll guide you through the entire process, but it's not a deal breaker if you don't know it. We expect that people aren't going to be precision teachers coming in. As long as they're open to learning and learning something new and doing things a little different that maybe they're used to, what we try to tell them is that it's really going to make you better at your job. You're going to see better outcomes with your clients. You're going to enjoy it. You get to learn. You get to expand your skill sets and talk about it that way.
You probably already know that Behavior University creates engaging ABA content for new and experienced professionals. Whether it's RBT training or webinars for BACB CEUs, Behavior University has you covered. Behavior University is launching an interactive BACB supervisor training, an innovative approach to supervision training with interactive video to practice decision-making and tools to create a personalized portfolio to take with you when you're done. The course is designed to guide new supervisors through applying the important skills required for effective supervision to their own unique experiences. Behavior University also offers 2 tiers of RBT training. Choose the essentials for the 40-hour course or the premium to add a full kit of study materials and a full-length practice exam. In addition to these features, supervisors can now purchase access to these RBT courses so they can monitor any RBT training for course progress and quiz performance. Supervisors will also receive tools and content to support training of new staff. Users rave about Behavior University RBT training, calling it the clearest instruction, the course that made it stick, amongst other comments. BCBAs say that their staff clearly get it after taking their course. So to check out what they've built and to get podcast-specific discounts, head on over to behavioruniversity.com/observations. Is it helpful when you're talking with these folks that you're trying to get them acquainted with precision teaching to kind of maybe separate the actual charting of the data because I sometimes think that people just think it's precision teaching is just using the chart, which of course it's not. It's using rate of response as or other dimensional units of behavior, I suppose, as kind of fundamental. Those are the things that are under scrutiny, if you will. Those are the things that you're measuring. You're not measuring percent correct and things like that. And as such, you're in a lot of, at least the things that I'm familiar with in the PT world, that there's you're doing learning trials and units of time, if you will. So it's just a number correct per whatever unit of time that you're examining, whether it's 15, 30, 60 seconds, etc. Instead of 10 trials, which with no real kind of endpoint to it from a temporal perspective. So do you see, I guess, I'm just curious, again, I'm trying to put I know enough about precision teaching to be dangerous. I don't consider myself like a full-blown precision teacher. But I understand the value of it, certainly. But again, I'm trying to put the newbie hat on here. And what is it like taking someone who is used to doing 10 trials of X, then 10 trials of Y, and then 10 trials of Z, as their quote unquote program, and moving towards a fluency-based instructional model?
Yeah.
And maybe you could and perhaps you could do a much better job of explaining how that works than I just did. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's so interesting about, precision teaching is really, I like to say, like decision and measurement system. So we're using the chart to help us make good database decisions. And then one thing you also learn about, and which I think is pretty amazing for people who come on board and learn it, is instructional design. There's a lot that goes into instructional design and measurement, and really understanding the impact that your interventions are having on the behavior of the person that you're working with. So it's not just, I think one of the things that I had to learn going into it is it's not just fluency. I probably for a long time, we were making this large mistake of just calling, like, we're going to do precision teaching, but really what we meant was fluency-based instruction, and not understanding the difference between the fluency-based instruction or frequency building and precision teaching as a whole. And once I got past that point, I realized, like, oh, I can take any instructional method that I'm doing and put it on the chart. So I can, if I just want to measure the discrete trials that I'm running, I could use a count chart, and I can put it on the chart, and I can analyze my data in the same way that I would be analyzing the fluency-based instruction that I'm doing, or I can collect duration data and look at that on a chart. There's a lot I can do with the chart. And that was I think a pretty big learning curve for me too. And I'm sure many people that come in and understanding, like, I'm not just asking you to do fluency-based instruction. You could take naturalistic instruction that you're running, or, a discrete trial program, or go in and I'll teach you how to build fluency, which is very important, and do some component of fluency-based instruction too. So all of our team members have to learn that distinction of it's not just going to be fluency-based instruction and the, aims that we're looking for, and that fast-paced 1 minute timing that you might be doing, or who knows, 10-second timing. You can do a lot more and put that on the chart too, and still make database decisions. And we do a lot of instruction around understanding your data. You're making database decisions every 3 to 5 data points. And when it's fluency-based instruction, you're making database decisions within the moment during that time to figure out what's working and what's not working, and change your behavior, because the learner is always right to change your instruction a little bit. So you can make I think a decent shift between, okay, I ran discrete trials, and now I'm just going to measure it a little bit differently and visually analyze it differently than I had before. But I think it's a much more sensitive measure, and you can make better database decisions from that.
Got it. That's a very helpful answer. I appreciate that. So it's more than just going fast. You can do a lot more. I get it. Great. So I want to get into this study that you shared with me. We'll get to that in just a second. But I guess one more, exposure type of question, if you will, for people who may not have contact with it. So as the organization decide to make this shift towards using this, standard celeration chart and a precision teaching approach, et cetera, what what was the response of your funding partners and agencies that you're working with? Did you have to give them a little, kind of chart 101, or I've also heard stories of people from other walks of life seeing the chart and like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because they might have a more of a quantitative background than and then I've heard stories of everything else in between.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what those data mean to your funding sources.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think that was one thing that we were maybe a little nervous about at first, that funding sources probably don't see data coming at them this way very often. But we've had a pretty good response from funding sources. We send them the charts along with the reports that we write, and maybe sometimes they're only looking at the reports and see the charts and get a little confused and don't want to admit it. Not sure, but I've heard good things from funders in terms of, they haven't questioned the way that we display data. Some people do. I have gotten a response sometimes where it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense to me. I see all your data points, the numbers, it makes sense to me. Sometimes they might ask us to explain it a little bit more. We've done some work with our funders in terms of why we, what is precision teaching, why we use it, how we measure our data, what it looks like, just in case they have questions. We probably get more questions surrounding the way that treatment plan goals are written, because they're used to seeing a percent correct as your mastery criteria, which there's no percent correct. And this, we're using and this method and analyzing our data this way, you're not going to have a percent correct. And that, I think we get questions on sometimes, but we have data to give them, and instead of seeing our percent correct, they're going to see either a aim range of so many correct responses per minute, or they're going to see a number of correct responses and maybe the number of errors we're looking to decrease, because that's one thing, you can look at on the chart your number of correct responses against your number of incorrect responses. And we want to have at least a certain number of correct and decrease our errors, or not see errors over a certain number of days. And so our funders have gotten used to that, and we don't really get many questions on it at this point. I think our data is really clear. We have sometimes, because you measure such precise behavior, when you're pinpointing behavior, we might have 2 to 3 charts per treatment plan goal with a bunch of data on them that we're submitting. And there's plenty of data to back up everything that we're doing. So I think that's something that we haven't gotten many questions on at this point. We've even been successful at teaching some families. Like, let me send you through a quick course on understanding your child's data, and let me teach you about the chart. And I've had some families who have loved it.
I'm wondering if the funders respond to the line that goes up to the aim, the projection line. And that, I don't believe that's probably something that is seen elsewhere. And of course, I'm sure they want to see clients meet their goals and whatnot. Do you ever receive feedback based on that, in terms of like, oh yeah, I could, we can make a projection. I used to say prediction, but I was corrected by Rick Cabina that if things continue the same way, at the same rate, then we're going to meet this goal by June 27th. I'm just pulling a date out of the thin air. Do you get commentary about those parts of the chart when you're having these interactions with funding sources?
I would say not as much in that detail of them paying attention to the specific data point, or saying, oh, look at that rate of acceleration. That's lovely. I mean, I wish they would, but that would be great. But we do, though, have had some commentary on the number of database decisions that we're making. You're making decisions every 3 to 5 data points, and it's very clear when you make a decision and what you're doing, whether that's a day or to change it harder because they've met their step or their slice that they're on, and you're going to the next one, or make it, even if it's not going well, we can see it from the data and we make a change to make it easier, put in some type of intervention. And that's the one thing where I think we have a good conversation with funders on, is that, you know, we are actively, and you can tell you're actively involved in making changes to your client's programming. And it's very clear that you were there making the decisions, even if it's not going the way that you had expected for them to meet the goal. There are good database decisions happening in order to get them where they need to be. And I think that's one selling point maybe to a funding source, is that you can tell how engaged we are and how much, exactly what we're doing with our time that they're funding, is that we are in there making consistent decisions, nothing sitting. If it's not making progress, we're intervening. And if it is making progress, you can see exactly how much progress they're making over time.
Are you looking for a new job, but you're overwhelmed with all the emails that you're getting from various ABA agencies? What if there was someone who was in your corner and could help you find the perfect job placement? Well, that person exists. Barbara Voss has been working as a recruiter for over 30 years, and her company, HRIC, specializes in placing BCBAs in permanent full-time positions throughout the United States. Barbara has been placing BCBAs since 2011, so she knows our business, and she offers personalized service to any BCBA looking for a new position. She also helps companies looking to hire BCBAs too. Here are just some of the things Barbara can help you with. She can provide information about salary ranges in different markets across the country. She can help you write your resume. She can coordinate and prepare you for the interview process, and even help negotiate the right salary for you. And best of all, there are no charges to any candidate for all of these services. When you're ready to make a change and want to work with someone who will listen to you and understand what you need in a new position, contact Barbara at HRIC. To schedule a confidential discussion, head over to hricolorado.com. Again, that's hricolorado.com, and hit the contact button to connect with Barbara. You won't be disappointed. All right, so I think this is probably a good time as any to get into the paper that you had shared with me, and that's increasing trials presented to children with autism using frequency building with modeling and feedback. And that's a paper that you published with Nicole Keene and Christina Gallagher. So I guess one of the things, and I'll certainly link to this in the show notes for folks who want to run down the reference, of course. So what I'd like to know, I got a couple questions based off of this paper. I suppose one of them might just be a general idea of, what was the problem that you were and your colleagues were encountering that led you to kind of develop this intervention?
Yeah, I don't even know if it was a problem as much as a when we got so excited about learning about frequency building and fluency-based instruction and the amazing things that can happen when you're fluent at a skill. We had this moment where we were like, oh, we're using this with our kids. Why wouldn't we be doing the same thing for our staff? Like, I think that's one thing that sometimes as behavior analysts, maybe we're not as good as we should be at using the behavior analytic principles and everything we know about what we're teaching others and using that in staff training. So when we thought about this, we said, why, if the problem that we might want to solve is fluency within your session, being able to pick up materials and present instruction at a faster, more fluent pace, and not having to stop and fiddle with materials or look around the data sheet and read it a second or third time or look at the chart, just being more fluent with trial presentation, then the obvious answer to us was we should use fluency-based instruction with our staff too, and then that's how they're going to get fluent, which we hadn't really thought of before. And so we took that and we brought it into staff training, and in particular wanted to look at, can I get you more fluent with just reading a slice or looking at a learning channel. If I look at a data sheet and I see say animals that I can pick up materials quickly and more fluently run a session and increase the number of trials that we're presenting. I think it was more exciting just to think about, like, why aren't we doing more fluency-based instruction within our staff training to make them more fluent responders?
Tell me a little bit about how you guys set this up. What were you measuring? What was the intervention that you used to, affect change? And what was there anything unique or unusual that you learned from doing this that you didn't expect? So I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah.
What are you can't get everything into a paper, of course, and so I'm really curious if there's any kind of like minutia or any kind of aha moments and things like that and the like.
Yeah, I think my one aha moment, we did measure some social validity. I think talking to people outside of there, we still use a lot of fluency-based instruction in our staff training, but this was a very particular, like, I want to try out a bunch of different things along the way to see what works best. And I have people who will say, that was so much fun. And I really, like, you really enjoyed it that much? Like, you want to go do this again? Because not everyone is thinking that staff training, especially when I'm sitting there measuring every aspect of your behavior and your rate of instruction, whether it's correct, is always fun. And I got the best feedback in terms of they liked looking at their own behavior on the chart. They liked seeing their data change after, doing the pull-out sessions. We did pull-out training sessions to run the frequency building sessions. So we would pull them out and bring out a bunch of materials and data sheets and say, like, okay, here are your materials, here's your data sheet. We're going to do look at the data sheet. You had 3 minutes to look over the data sheet, see what programming you should be running. And then I'm going to do a 1-minute timing. And you just see as fast as you can go, how many trials that you can present to me as an adult, as your pretend learner, in that 1 minute. And then after the minute was over, I'd tell them their data, and we would go back and we would, practice some more. We would fix whatever errors might have been occurring, or, they'd get fumbled up in some cases trying to go so fast. And then we would do it again. So we'd keep doing that until, we got to about 20 minutes of instruction, or they met their aim for that day. And we created our own aims because there isn't an aim out there for, a see-do, present trials, but we
right. It's not like banging out math facts or letter sounds.
It's not letter sounds. It's not handwriting, right? So we went and we observed a lot of people who we thought were, had tenure with us, were very good at presenting instruction, and we collected data across multiple employees, and that's kind of where we came up with our aim for it. And then afterwards, once they met a particular level or went through their pull-out training, we would then see how it applied to, okay, like, if you met your aim, which we're thinking you have, how does this apply now to your natural setting? So if you're thinking about, like, doing what we call, like, RESA checks, an application check is one of them. Like, can you take the skill that you're fluent at and go do it away from our, 1-minute timings where we're practicing it together? So they would then go back into the natural setting with one of their clients, and we would collect data then on their rate of trial presentation. And across all of our participants, it went up. We definitely met some obstacles along the way where they needed some more in the moment feedback, or some training on how to be good at mixing and varying across different trials using the same materials. We're big on naturalistic instruction, so I wanted it to be natural. I don't want you going in and presenting, anything you can think of just to meet the number of trials we're asking you to present. Like, we work with little kids. I want it to be natural and fluent in that sense. And that was one of our big areas of feedback that we had with the team members. Like, I know you want to go fast, but I need it also to be good instruction. And so we gave feedback on that. But overall, I was really impressed with how much people enjoyed being a part of the intervention. And saw how successful it was and loved tracking and charting their own data. Like, absolutely love looking at the change in their own data, which I think is another thing that's pretty great about teaching people how to chart and look at their own data and look at the change over time, is that, you know, they could see that they were making progress and that it made a progress or made an impact on what they were doing with their clients.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a couple things you mentioned that perhaps worth hovering over, you know, and one of them is how you developed your own aim based off of perhaps something that doesn't have an existing aim out there. And so it sounds like a common sense approach of just looking who your, you know, kind of internal experts were and just taking data on their performance and using that as benchmarks. So I think that's really I think a good takeaway here from this discussion, certainly. You know, and I think also yeah, and it does sound almost counterintuitive that your employees enjoyed that, because you know, certainly being asked to do things faster kind of brings to mind, like was that Lucille Ball episode where she's, you know, there's the assembly line keeps going faster and faster, and you kick, you know. I might have to find a YouTube of that for folks who might not get that reference, but you know, but
have a running joke that you know, when you're first learning how to do frequency building or fluency-based instruction, that you get what we call the fluency sweats. Like, you're just trying to go really fast. And
the fluency what?
Sweats.
Oh.
It is an ongoing joke within the organization, especially when you're teaching people to do it at first. And as a person who's presenting the instruction, you don't want to have a teacher feeling, so you need to be fast as the teacher too. And the fluency sweats are like an ongoing joke here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's good. I mean, all the more reason that you guys were sounding like you were focused on the quality of instruction and not just going, you know, recklessly fast. So that's really good. What do you see? You know, this is something obviously that begs for more research, of course, but more generally, do you have a sense in terms of the more trials presented perhaps in a given session and perhaps with other types of learning modalities or instructional modalities, do you get a sense of there's faster skill acquisition using this particular approach? And again, this just screams for actual research, and I'm asking you for your kind of personal anecdotes. So
I know my anecdotal opinion would be yes. I've done more work recently on measuring and keeping track of outcomes. So that's one thing that these days I'm pretty passionate about. So we have a lot of ways to track a lot of data across our organization. And I do truly anecdotally think that, the more opportunities you have, the faster your skill acquisition is going to be, especially when you're having to make such frequent database decisions, because you're not sitting on something that you're not learning. And I think that's one thing that precision teaching really, if you're a precision teacher, you're honed in on that, as well as instructional design and understanding, what to do when someone's not learning and figure out, what our interventions are going to be. And so, I think anecdotally speaking, absolutely, like the more opportunities that you're having in that shorter time span, then the faster you're going to acquire skills and the better outcomes that you're going to have. That's one thing that I would love to be able to actually pull all the data and publish someday, is looking at, client outcomes based on the instructional methodology that you're using, and looking at, can we predict, as you would say, or project, when clients coming in will meet a specific level or goals or make a certain amount of progress. That's something that I would love to be able to take our data and use to be able to show, because I think you get there. It's just a lot of data analysis to figure it out.
I see. Are are you guys using an electronic charting platform?
We are. Yes, we're using Precision X,
Okay.
or what was formerly known as Chartlytics. It had changed through our time using it. And so it does allow us to really like pull a lot of data from it. So we found a way to pull data from there so we could see all the changes that are made. So we can see when there's a change harder or a change easier, how many database decisions are made per client. And we pull those into a separate database and look at them. So we can flag, we look at rate of skill acquisition per client. We can flag maybe those who aren't moving as fast for other interventions. So that the electronic system really allows us to analyze data in a much larger way than we were able to before. I do just have to like throw a little shout out to like old paper charting in there. There's some like, I don't know, older part of me that misses having paper and just dropping dots and plotting your data, but it is much more, I would say, much more accurate. And there's so many more things you can see on the electronic version than you could on paper.
Very good. Well, Central Reach, you're welcome. There's your free commercial. Yeah. So Rick and Dave, this one's on the house. Anyhow, all kidding aside, so if you're a listener to this particular episode and you're thinking like, oh, this sounds really interesting. How do I learn more about this? What recommendations do you have for someone who wants to, try to start even just thinking about measuring behavior in this way, or teaching in a frequency building, approach, or any other modality that fits into this teaching approach? Where would you point that listener to?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like I was really lucky to have my own personal chart parents, mentors through this process. I would say finding somebody who is a very fluent user and can teach you all these things is definitely a way to go. I could give another shout out to Central Reach. They actually have some great training resources and their CEU courses that you could go through that really explain precision teaching and charting. And I've sent people through a couple of those who just want to learn more. There's a couple of, Rick's precision teaching book kind of gives you the rundown of all things you need to know if you want to start implementing the use of the charts and understanding precision teaching and what the learning channel and the pinpoint and the parts of the chart and all of those things. That's a huge resource that I think is great for someone who's new. And then I don't know, maybe Stephanie Bates, or going and finding YouTube videos or different things that can make it seem a little less scary. I think that was the one thing for me. You see this blue chart that you've never seen before, and it's a little scary to think about changing your own behavior and doing something different. And you just need someone to show you how to, as I call it in class, like you lighten it up, drop some dots, learn how to plot some data, analyze your data, and it's not that scary anymore.
All right. Good resources for sure. One thing I'd probably throw in there too is join the Standard Celeration Society's Facebook page, and any question that I've seen people throw into that Facebook group. There's people enthusiastically and warmly welcome people who are interested and curious about the chart. And I've just seen people.
I would also say going to the conference.
Well, that for sure. That's obviously a different level of commitment than joining a Facebook group.
It is. But I do have to say, like, if you start out in the Facebook group and then you get brave enough to go to the conference, one thing that won me over initially when we were first learning was the chart share at the conference, where people are taking charts about anything. So it could be, I've seen from a task analysis of toothbrushing to charting like fetal kicks when someone was pregnant, to charting like the history of rock and roll. I think I've seen before on chart. So that that totally won me over in terms of like, there are so many things that you can put on a chart and different ways to look at it. And like, they make it very fun. It was a great learning experience, of going to a chart share. When I think that for me is like, I'm in it. I'm here to stay. I'm never leaving. This is the way I'm going to look at things.
I've never made it to a conference, and I've been wanting to go, and just personally, the timing hasn't just lined up yet, but I definitely would like to go at some point or another, for those reasons and many more. But yeah, you're right. It is funny how, I think you were saying earlier, it's hard to see graph data on other formats, especially like in, kind of popular media or, if you're looking at like the stock market or other sorts of things, I'm always thinking like, what would that look like on a chart? And I don't know, it's just kind of perhaps a weird side effect of becoming more acquainted with this way of viewing things. So this has been great fun. I've really appreciated you coming on and sharing, your story about how you kind of learned about this stuff. And it just seems like you guys have, taken the ball and really run with it. So kudos to you and all your colleagues at Bierman. Let's close out with this, Chrissy. What advice would you have for a newly minted BCBA or perhaps a BCBA of any experience level? I'm coming to evolve my question a little bit, because a lot of times I hear the answers and it's like, that's applicable to me too, or anyone. So, what advice would you have for someone just starting out? All kidding aside.
Yeah, I think that maybe the thing that I've learned over the years, when you're just starting out, you still have a lot to learn, right? And I'm sure plenty of people have given it similar statements, but sometimes you might not do great, or you might not all but know everything. And going into it being very eager to continue learning, even though you just, finished up your master's and passed the big exam, there's a lot more to learn. I feel like I've learned so much from other people over the years. And as I continue to go through the field, I realize how much more I have to learn. And going into it with that mindset, understanding that you're going to make mistakes, you're not going to know everything, and you're not expected to know everything. So ask questions, be eager to learn, find a mentor, really be open to trying new things and seeing like the ways that you can continue to expand your own skill set. I think if I wasn't open to learning, I would have never accepted the charts and been here at this point in my career. And then, you think you have so much more to bring to the field once you kind of have that mindset.
Fantastic. Great words to end on. So, Chrissy, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.